Dave, she muttered, we need to talk. We have some things we need to work out. Of course, Gwen, I replied, looking at my wife with a smirk. What is it? Put that bloody paper down for a minute and listen to me, she snapped, getting my attention. Although in truth, I was still assessing Arsenal's chances in the match against Chelsea that weekend. Let's be honest, the paper had mentioned that Walcott might not be fully fit after last week's injury. Yes, dear, I agreed, folding the paper in my lap, though I continued to hold it tightly in my hands, hoping she wouldn't notice. Last month, she said simply, and froze, staring at me. And what was that? I answered completely innocently. It was hot. At the end of that week, she continued. At the end of what week? I asked, though I could already feel the anxiety overwhelming me. You know exactly what the end of the week is, she spat out. The end of the week when you and 3 of your damn friends went on that damn stupid so-called damn made-up kid fishing trip. Oh, it's the end of the week, I replied, unable to help myself, and the paper fell out of my hands. There was a chance I was in trouble. So what is it? I know. What do you know? I gritted my teeth. I know what you did, she stated, looking at me intently. We went fishing, I mumbled, somehow realizing I was at a loss, but floundering for something to say. And on the last night, Gwen demanded, and I realized I'd lost. Screw it. I'm a partner in a small, specialized construction business. There's me, the so-called smart guy with qualifications, Ted who does the paperwork, and Mike and Nick who provide the muscle and know-how on the construction site and convince our construction crews to do what they need to do, faster and probably better than they otherwise could. We are a bit of a mixed group, but we get on well with each other, and the 4 of us with our other halves have become good friends. Last August, the 4 of us went on a long, week-long fishing trip, although to be honest, Ted was the only one who knew what a fishing rod was. We sailed on some sort of boat, the 3 of us more interested in keeping the beer cold than what bait we used, and most evenings we had a pint of beer in the local pub. And then we got to the final night, didn't we? Let's go into town, Mike suggested. There's more life on the coast and we could have some fun. I'm not sure I'm up for that, I protested, but I was talked into it, and to be honest, I wasn't too upset about it. So we were dressed in our casual outfits and tried to act like we were acting like we were in our 20s. The beer was good and plentiful, the music was loud and generally awful, and the scenery was pretty interesting. Bloody hell, Nick growled as a rather slender girl walked past us. How about this one? How about that one? I interrupted them, pointing at the other girl. Shit, Ted exploded. Double shit, Mike added. And Nick and I just looked at each other and agreed with them. It probably wouldn't have been any different. The 3 of us are happily married, and Mike, though single, has a special girl at home. But we didn't realize there would be a bachelorette party. Girls' night? Sort of. Yes, the resort caters to everyone. And that night there was a group of 4 30-something girls there celebrating the divorce of one of them. We weren't even sure which one was which, since they all seemed to be wearing wedding rings, when they rolled up to our table and demanded that they join us. Sure, Mike agreed, gathering a few chairs from a neighboring table, and none of us thought to argue. What are you 4 doing here? The blonde asked. Fishing, Mike laughed, offering no further explanation. Well, there you have me hooked, handsome, the blonde replied. And what are you going to do about it? To our surprise, but probably not hers, Mike quickly stood up, took her hand, and walked away. And that was the last we saw of the couple that evening. Trust Gloria, the slender dark-haired one giggled. She's such a slut. Mike's not married, Nick pointed out. Gloria's husband can never know, giggled the slightly fuller one. And that set the tone for the rest of the evening as our conversations became more and more explicit and crude as the evening went on. Come back to our hotel and we'll show you something else, promised the redhead, probably the prettiest of them all, and the one who had been flirting with me. We, of course, refused. Like hell we refused. 5 minutes later, we were paired up and walking hand in hand with our chosen one to their rather run-down hotel 10 minutes away. Listen, guys, I whispered to the other 2 as we were left alone and the girls left to go to the restroom. We're just going to stay for half an hour or so, okay? Yeah, Ted agreed. I'm in favor of it, Nick agreed. If my Jilly finds out, I don't know what will happen to me. 7 pints of beer or ruminations with our little brains, but nothing came of it. and early the next morning the three of us, guiltily staggering, parted ways, hell-bent on keeping our promises. And to be honest, I wish we'd never agreed to go fishing in the first place. Next chapter. And the last night? Demanded Gwen. Why? I played for time. About those 4 hookers you picked up? About them? Yeah, about them, she snapped back. You want to tell me about them? Well, Mike went off with one of them, Gwen. I tried to brush her off, not knowing how much she really knew, and not even bringing Mike into it since he wasn't really married. And the redhead? She asked, and I realized there was no point in trying to prevaricate anymore. Better to just come clean and hope for the best. We've had too much to drink, sweetheart, I admitted. I'm not denying that something happened, but I don't remember too much. So you admit it, Gwen snorted angrily. You climbed into bed with that redhead and entertained her all night long. That's not exactly true, I replied honestly, trying to remain calm. I may have fiddled with her, but in the state I was in, it was over in a couple minutes and we both dozed off. And the next morning? No way, I objected honestly. When I woke up, I was terribly ashamed of what had happened, ashamed of myself. Besides, she didn't look as attractive as she did the night before. And if she had looked different, would it have mattered? My wife asked me, turning her face into an unreadable mask and setting me an unenviable task. Should I give her a politically correct answer or tell her the truth? I chose the latter. I'm not sure, I admitted quietly. I'd like to think you're not. I doubt I could forgive myself, Gwen, so I'm just glad I haven't. I believe you, Dave, she said with relief. Thanks, honey, I smiled uncertainly at her. We can get through this. We both love each other and we have a great marriage. I'll do whatever it takes, Gwen, my word of honor. As I picked up the words to justify myself, she just stood there staring at me until she finally broke the silence. Don't think you're getting off that easy, you bastard, Gwen informed me, her voice frighteningly calm and clear. I'm meeting with the rest of the girls tonight to discuss what we're going to do. They all know? Of course they know, you fool, she replied, flaring up with anger again. How the hell do you think I found out? Did one of the guys blab? I asked. Who? Who opened their mouth? That's for us to know and you to worry about. I'm going on a date with Kim, Jilly, and hopefully Mary, Mike's girlfriend. We're going to spend the night on the town and we'll probably be back late. For God's sake, don't do anything stupid, Gwen, I pleaded. 2 wrongs won't make a right. We don't plan to, but who knows? And your opinion doesn't matter anymore. We're here to discuss what to do with the 4 of you and how to make you pay. Please don't do anything we'll both regret, Gwen, I begged her. It won't help. Anything but that. We'll see. She ended the conversation and walked past me, heading for our bedroom, leaving me sitting there in despair. Next chapter. Considering how long it usually took her to get ready when we left the house, Gwen came back surprisingly quickly. She looked gorgeous, and in that flimsy dress, alarmingly vulnerable and worse, frighteningly available. Don't do it, Gwen, I repeated my warning. It's not so good when it goes the other way around, is it, asshole? I didn't plan it, Gwen, I pointed out. It just happened because we had too much to drink. I'm not planning anything, honey, she grinned. I'm just going to have a drink with the girls, but who knows what might happen if I drink too much. I clamped my mouth shut, not wanting to be sucked in even more. Short of tying her up, there was nothing more I could do about it, and deep down, I reluctantly admitted that I wasn't in a position to complain much. Deep down, I didn't think she'd do anything stupid, and her threats were her way of punishing me. Okay, that could be agreed to. Do the dishes while I'm gone, she growled at me. Yes, dear. Clean up after yourself in the living room. Yes, dear. The washing machine needs to be emptied. Yes, dear. There's a lot of ironing in the kitchen. You're mocking me, I rebelled. Perhaps you'd prefer that to some of my other ideas, Gwen almost shouted, her temper really boiling over by then. I'll think about it. I reluctantly backed off. If the choice was between bloody ironing and my wife's infidelity, it wasn't much of a choice, was it? When Gwen, without another word, left without another word, I was left very dissatisfied. Next chapter. Dring, dring. Dring, dring. Hey, Dave. It's Ted. I was greeted when I picked up the phone 10 minutes later. Has Gwen left yet? Just left, I informed him. What about Kim? Hardly what you'd call storming out, buddy. I thought she was going to use a bread knife against me. What about Nick and Jilly? I asked. Same thing, buddy. He's in the doghouse, just like the two of us. They've all gone into town for the night, and God only knows what they've done there. What about Mary? I asked. How is she doing with Mike? I have no idea, Ted replied. I suspect it was him who blabbed, but it doesn't matter now. If it was him, he'll suffer. And we don't? I asked. Not yet, Ted replied. But I guess we'll find out soon enough. We didn't talk again, and when he left, I called Nick, and his teenage daughter told me that Mom and Dad had a big fight. Then Mommy went somewhere and Daddy went to the pub. Mike didn't even pick up the phone. It was a pretty miserable few hours, which I spent not because I hated doing dishes, etc., but trying to make sense of something I was disgusted to even think about. Would Gwen do something stupid tonight? I thought not, at least not willingly, but she was out with Jilly, and Jilly, while gorgeous, had a mind of her own. There was a strong feminist streak in her, and she often clashed with me and Ted, though it was more like we were teasing her and she was overreacting. That's what bothered me. That overreaction. And then I just prayed that the three of them wouldn't do anything they'd regret later, and that they'd take the time to discuss it and somehow get over what we, their stupid drunken husbands, had done. So it was with some relief that I heard a car pull up to the house just after 11:30, and a few minutes later the door opened and Gwen walked in. I was pleased to note that there was nothing abnormal about her, and she looked just as neat and tidy and, more importantly, just as gorgeous as when she had left. Not a hair on her pretty head stood still. For a few moments she stood with a concerned look before she spoke. Did you do the dishes? Yes, and ironed, I replied, and sure enough I noticed the hint of a smile on her face. Are we going to bed? She wondered. How was your evening? I asked uncertainly. It went well, she smiled to herself. Don't worry, there won't be any surprises for you when we go to bed. So what did you two talk about? We'll discuss it tomorrow, she insisted. Let's go to bed. Good. When you're in a position like I am and your wife offers to go to bed 3 times for the same amount of money, why argue? Especially if the wife is a slender blonde like me and takes off her top before she's even in the bedroom. Suffice it to say that the night ended, as mysterious as it may seem, much better than I had any right to expect. The problem, of course, was it the calm before the storm? The next morning was as unrealistic as the unexpected entertainment of the day before. Breakfast was ready. We talked as we had any other morning before we both left for work, and twice I brought the conversation to our problem, after which she stared at me silently, oblivious to my gagging. Unsurprisingly, I didn't insist. Will you be home at the usual time, Dave? Gwen asked, getting ready to leave to catch the train. I think so, I replied, still puzzled by her attitude. Don't be late, she told me with a smile. I'll make something special. That won't be necessary, honey, I told her, still confused. Oh yes, honey, she grinned as she walked out of the house. We haven't talked about last night yet. Oh shit. When I got to the office, the other 3 were already there and having a lively conversation. Mike had thoroughly denied letting the cat out of the bag like the rest of us, and it wasn't until much later that we learned that Mike's girlfriend had decided to have him stalked. Apparently, Mike had been a naughty boy even before that night, so the 3 of us weren't too pleased that his pampering had backfired on us. But you all did it that night, he remarked, and we couldn't deny it. The day had gone to waste for all of us, and none of the others could shed any light on what our women had been up to the previous night, what they had discussed or planned. Mike wasn't even sure if Mary had been there, as she hadn't returned his calls, which probably wasn't surprising in retrospect. I got home around the usual time, where I was greeted by a frighteningly friendly Gwen with a kiss on the cheek and sat down to my favorite dinner she had made and a bottle of good claret. I suppose you want to know what we did last night. She surprised me when she returned to the room with a second bottle of wine. I was curious, I replied nervously. Nah. What would you say if I told you we picked up 4 studs, went back to their hotel, and let them entertain us to stupor? I'd hope you weren't telling me the truth, I replied sullenly. And we weren't, Gwen continued. We've been harassed a few times, and we might have, but we didn't do anything. We just talked. Talked? I asked, feeling more relaxed. Talked and made plans, she continued, as if I hadn't said anything. We were all discussing how we were going to pay it off. Lots of new pairs of shoes, I joked weakly, but she didn't laugh, and it didn't go away. It didn't go away at all. Well, you may know that all four of us are going to even things out, honey. Listen, Gwen, I growled angrily. If you think I'm going to put up with you going around hitting on guys at the bar for the next few weeks, you might want to think about something else. I already did that once when I was drunk, and I don't even remember if I actually did it, damn it. That's not the plan, she surprised me. Oh, well, it's just this once. You won't know who you're with, and you won't know when. All you need to know is that it's going to happen. Just once. And then we'll be even, and we can move on with our lives. Like nothing happened? I asked. It can be hard, my wife agreed. But if you try, I'll try too. There has to be another way, Gwen, I pleaded with her. But there wasn't. At least not in her mind. The four girls argued and took things apart and put them back together again. And no matter how much I argued, it was impossible to change her mind. It was clear to her, either get over it or get on my bike. And when I talked to Ted and Nick, they seemed to be in the same boat. As for Mike, while we knew Mary was with our wives and involved in the discussion, she never returned any of his calls. Dead end. Surrender, resign, and be punished was the position Ted and I were driven into, but Nick was willing to tell his wife to back off if she so chose. Mike, that bastard, was beginning to lose interest in our problems and had apparently already decided that the grass was greener elsewhere. At home, everything went on as if nothing had happened, and I convinced myself, or maybe fooled myself, that Gwen's threat was just that. Something to make us sweat, and certainly something to make sure we never strayed again. Eventually, after a week or so, Ted must have come to the same conclusion and studiously avoided any mention of our wives' threats. And even Nick stopped muttering threats to his wife under his breath. I think we all put it behind us and everyone was smiling again, both at home and at work. Even Mike had apparently hooked up with some girl, and although he didn't talk much about her, so I'm guessing it wasn't Mary, she was clearly making him happy. It was in this happy state of mind that I decided that Gwen and I needed to clear the air. Is everything okay between us now, dear? I asked one evening. Asked me one evening. I think so, Dave, she smiled back. It's so nice to get back to the way things used to be. Of course, I agreed happily, wrapped my arms around her and kissed her on the lips. I'm so glad you didn't have to carry out your threat. My heart raced as I felt her tense in my arms and look away. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, she answered a little too quickly. You're telling me... I growled, releasing myself from her embrace. I'm not telling you anything, Gwen muttered. For God's sake, woman, I exploded. Did you do that? Were you with another man? I told you so, she snapped back. You don't know when or with whom. Screw it, Gwen, I yelled at her. You can't do this to me. I'm sorry, honey, but I already did. She destroyed me. The argument that followed this exchange of information was short, but not sweet. There was a lot I wanted to say, but I was so wound up I couldn't find the words. And soon I hopped out of the house and headed for the local pub, calling Ted on the way and asking him to join me. Well, Ted, I greeted him, holding out the pint of beer I'd brought him. Gwen and I had a little chat today, and there's no way you're going to guess what that bitch said to me. I guess she was having fun with someone else, he dumbfounded me. You know, I exclaimed, spilling my beer. What about Kim? Her too. And Jilly? So I understand. And you're both okay with that? What happened is what happened, he stated indifferently. And you don't mind? What can I do? What can either of us do? What about Nick? He feels the same way I do. It's best to just leave the sleeping dogs lying around and get on with our lives. We've got enough problems with this council contract as it is. We don't need to worry about what we can't fix. But Nick was so convinced he'd throw Jilly out if she went for it. What happened? Changed his mind, I guess. That's it? So that Ted shrugged dismissively and asked if I was ready for another pint. I was ready. I was more than ready to drink a few more. Next chapter. And that seemed to be the end of it. Gwen forgave me for coming home in a rage, and life went back to normal. Incredibly normal, as it turned out. It was as if nothing had ever happened, unless I tried to broach the subject with Gwen again, in which case I was rebuffed, and when I tried to talk to Ted, Nick, or Mike about it, they too brushed me off. It was like everyone was trying to pretend that nothing had happened, and upon reflection I decided it would be best if I followed their lead. That's not to say that I wasn't interested in who my wife was sleeping with, And I'm not claiming that I didn't get jealous when I saw her talking to a guy I didn't know. I realized that 3 women, or maybe all 4, were unlikely to do it with someone they knew. It would be too risky. On the other hand, I just couldn't imagine that Gwen, or Jilly for that matter, would hit on strange men in a bar. Kim maybe, Mary no problem, but not Jilly and certainly not my Gwen. They just wouldn't do it. The more I thought about it, the more likely the scenario became that Mary had introduced them to one of her young male friends. Or maybe one. Perhaps one lucky bastard had managed to entertain all 4 of them. Like I said, I tried to forget about it, but it kept eating away at me like a festering wound inside me. And after a couple months, I couldn't keep it in anymore. "What the hell is going on with you, Dave?" demanded Gwen one day. "You've been like a bear with a sore head all week." "You know exactly what's wrong with me," I replied, glaring at her. "That's not the point," she tried to brush off my concerns. "You got what you deserved, and now we're even." Okay, maybe I deserved it, and maybe we're even. But not knowing who it was gnaws at me. "Gwen?" "I told you, honey," she explained to me for what seemed like the 100th time. "You'll never know when or who, and I'm not going to change my mind." "But you have no idea what it's like, Gwen," I pleaded, barely holding back tears. "Every time I see you talking to another man at a party or something, I wonder if it's him. Several times I've had to restrain myself from walking up to you and hitting the person you were talking to." "Oh my God, you've got it bad, don't you?" she answered me sympathetically. "I'm sorry, honey, but I just can't tell you. All I can tell you is that it was only once and it will never happen again. If it helps you, I promise you that it was nothing special." "You didn't like it?" "I didn't say I didn't like it, Dave, and I wouldn't lie to you." "And that's supposed to make me feel better?" I hummed. "Maybe not right away, but your story about how quickly things ended with that redhead helped me a little when I thought about it later. So maybe what I told you will help you." "So you're saying it didn't last long?" I tried to find relief. "I didn't say that, honey," she replied almost reluctantly. "I just said it was pretty routine. Nothing special, really. Not as good as when we do it on a good day." "On a good day?" "Yeah, sorry." "Thanks, damn it." I couldn't let it go, even though I wanted to. I just knew that if I kept it in, I would eventually explode, and it would ruin our marriage. I even tried to explain to Gwen how serious it was, but she still wouldn't calm down or even confirm that it wasn't someone we knew, however vaguely. The only information I managed to get out of her was that it wasn't the same guy entertaining all 3 of us and that Mary eventually left and wasn't involved. She and Mike had split up, so I guess there was no point in her doing it. I questioned Ted and Nick to the point where they stopped arguing with me and told me to shut up, get on with my life, and stop trying to ruin it. Their words made sense, maybe. But the thing that was gnawing at me from the inside wasn't going away. I was calm most of the time, but then someone would say something on TV, or one of our clients would mention something happening on the road or something, and it would come back. I was thinking about divorce, and then I thought about finding another woman to have fun with so I could have my own secret. I thought about all sorts of things, but all to no avail. Eventually, in my obsession, I began to put 2 and 2 together, realizing that Gwen had never lied to me. From what she said, I realized that he or they were men we had met at least once. And also that Mary, Mike's girlfriend, had nothing to do with it. And then it hit me, or at least a serious possibility came to mind. Mike was the youngest of us, and Mary was 4 or 5 years younger than him. She socialized with young men, and yes, we met quite a few of them at parties and ran into others in pubs. Of course, some of them were men, and heck, 6 months or so ago, Nick and I had teased our wives for flirting with a couple of young guys who seemed to be quite taken with them. What were their names? Mick, Rick, Nick, Dick? Something like that, but I couldn't remember, but I was sure I had something, even though I didn't know where to put it. But then I did find it. Without telling the others, I made an excuse to go out for the evening and found myself in town, searching through pubs and random clubs for who I hoped would be there. No, not those guys, but Mary herself, whom I hadn't seen since a week or so before that disastrous fishing trip. The odds were slim, but I got lucky and found her at the bar with a couple other girls. I waited patiently while the other 2 girls asked a few guys to dance and made my move. "Hi, Mary," I greeted her, taking an uninvited seat on the stool that one of her friends had just vacated. "Long time no see." Her look alone confirmed that I was on the right track, It was a mixture of surprise and, oh shit, what's he doing here? Hi, Mary, I repeated. How are you? Hi, she said, not meeting my eyes. I need to talk to you, Mary, I told her softly, not wanting to scare her off. No way, she shouted, shocking me with her assertiveness. Back off. Mary, calm down, I pleaded, surprised by her reaction. I just want to talk. The hell you wanna, you bastard, she shouted, drawing the attention of everyone around her. There's no way in hell I'm entertaining you. What? What else could I say? Back off and leave me alone. What would you do? What would you do when 3 of her extremely large friends, somewhat younger and much larger than me, came to support her opinion? I walked away. I left of my own free will and very quickly. In fact, I left with my tail between my legs. And what became of me? You can guess for yourself because at that point I had no idea. My wife refused to talk to me, my partners, my friends avoided my questions to the point of asking me to back off. And now some girl I hardly knew was practically pitting heavyweights against me. What was I supposed to do? Decide I'd had enough? Truth be told, I was angry to the point where I didn't care at all about the outcome. I was going to get to the bottom of this no matter what it cost me. Gwen, I practically shouted to her when I got back into the house. What's going on? If you don't tell me, I'm out of here. I swear I'll pack my things and you'll never see me again. I stared at her. The anger was genuine. Fists clenched, teeth gritted. I meant what I said. I was ready to pounce on her, and one way or another I was going to get to the bottom of this. And then everything went black. I mean really black, like I'd completely blacked out. Is he okay? Damn it, Mike. You didn't have to hit him that hard. Give me a break, Kim. You're just as much to blame as the rest of us. Give yourself a break. If the 3 of you had confessed to him, we wouldn't be here. Calm down, everyone. He doesn't have a clue about anything. We can still get away with it. That's easy for you to say. You're not married to him. You don't have to look him in the eye every damn morning and pretend everything's okay. We agreed, Gwen. All 6 of us agreed. So where the hell is Mary? Why didn't she play her part? Don't blame her. Mike screwed up their relationship. He should have kept his pants on. Don't try to pin the blame on me, hypocrite. If you had stopped when you were supposed to, he wouldn't have found out anything. Shut up. All we have to do is... At this point, I must have slipped back into oblivion, which, considering what I had just heard, although I didn't realize it at the time, was probably the best place for me to be. Hello, Mr. Rogers. How are you feeling? I blinked my eyes and looked around. Where was I? A beautiful girl. A very pretty girl dressed all in white. Mr. Rogers, it's all right. How are you feeling? Beautiful girl. The same beautiful girl in the same white dress. Everything must be all right. The pretty girl smiled at me. Mr. Rogers, the girl said softly. How is your head? Does nothing hurt? I think I love you. I sighed and slipped back into oblivion, I suspect quite happily. Yeah, okay, it seemed obvious, but not to me at that moment, although I should have known better. The pretty girl turned out to be a nurse, albeit a very pretty one, and I was in some kind of hospital, though I had no idea how I got there. I vaguely remembered a heated discussion erupting around me. Something about Mike's pants, hypocrites, and Mary's absence. It all made no sense, my head hurt, and I didn't want to deal with it. Hey, Dave. I felt like someone was addressing me, and I looked up hopefully. Gwen? Yes, honey, the other pretty girl replied. Are you back with us? I think I am. I hope so. I smiled back at her as if recognizing my wife. What the hell am I doing here? You fell down the stairs, Dave, the pretty woman I was still trying to register in my brain told me. You have a bump on your head, but you're okay now. We'll be able to take you home as soon as the doctor releases you. Home? Yes, honey, then you have nothing to worry about. Okay, I answered out loud. Damn liar, I muttered quietly under my breath so the bitch wouldn't hear when the conversation that had been going on around me a while ago popped back into my head. Pants. Hypocrite. Hit him so hard. Mary. You didn't guess? She said I had nothing to worry about? You've got to be goddamn kidding me. It may seem obvious to you reading this nonsense, but it took me a while to put 2 and 2 together back then. 4 girls, yes, all 4 of them, came up with a revenge plan where each of them had to get into bed with another man to make things right. And they needed 4 willing men to do it. Okay, they could take one, but that didn't fit into their plan, did it? So where would they find four willing men on short notice that they could trust to keep their mouths shut and maybe realize when a good story was waiting for them? I knew my wife had always had a thing for Mike, though their flirting had always been pretty innocent, and I'd seen Kim hit on Nick when she had a few glasses of wine in her, but I was sure it had never spilled over into anything more. Ted and Jilly? I have no idea, but anything's possible, so what was I supposed to do? Marry? It all seemed so absurd that I could hardly believe it, but at the same time all these details fit together so well. Anyway, I had no idea what to do about it. I wasn't sure I wanted my marriage to fall apart, but at that moment I was perhaps more concerned that this conflict would cause our thriving business to collapse just when things were going so well. What to do? I decided that I couldn't blame my wife for the threads of evidence I had managed to gather, and I simply no longer trusted my three partners and so-called friends. There was only one safe route left, and I headed for the lion's den again. "Mary, it's me, Dave," I said into the phone when she picked up. "Please don't hang up." There was silence on the other end, but at least there were no sounds of disconnection. "Are you there, Mary?" I pleaded. "You're the only one I can talk to." "I'm not doing that, Dave," she muttered back. "I told them it was a stupid idea and I shouldn't have agreed to it. If we hadn't all had a drink, there's no way I would have agreed to it." "Agreed to what, Mary?" I asked quietly. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she sobbed. "I can't. I won't." "I don't know what you're talking about, Mary," I replied softly. "I have my suspicions, but nothing more than that." "You really don't know?" "Scout's honor." I tried to defuse the situation. "I go crazy trying to figure it out. And then I get hit over the head and end up in the hospital. You have to help me, Mary." "Hospital? It's a long story, Mary. Can we meet, please?" "So you don't want to entertain me, Dave?" she asked nervously, leaving me puzzled. How to answer such a question posed by a gorgeous, slender blonde girl? "I can't honestly answer no to that question, Mary," I answered honestly. "But that's not the point. All I need to do is talk to you." "Okay," she murmured uncertainly. "I'm free at lunchtime. Do you know the Anchor Pub on Broad Street?" "I'll find it," I assured her. And an hour later I walked into the busy bar looking for her. Next chapter. "This way, Dave," she greeted me when I spotted her and waved her hand, sighing about what a fool Mike had been to let such a stunning girl slip away from him. "Maybe we should move over there," I suggested, realizing that when she moved over to make room for me, the view for the guys peeking at her improved, which they didn't miss either. "It's okay, Dave. It'll brighten up their lunch break and it won't do me any harm," she grinned back. "But thanks for the offer. It was nice of you. And now they won't try to talk to me when you're with me." "So what do you want to know?" Mary asked, getting right to the point. "What do you already know?" "Only that my wife, all three of my wives have been doing it with someone else, and I suspect I'm the only husband not involved." "I think you're the only one," she confirmed. "You stayed away because I chose you but chickened out. I tried to talk the others out of it when it came to me a little later what a stupid idea it was, but by then it was too late. One of them had rushed to judgment." "One of them?" I asked, feeling an unpleasant sensation in my stomach, though in the end it didn't really matter. "Sorry, Dave, it was Gwen," Mary confirmed my fears. She and Mike weren't hanging around idly, and I suspect they'd had a bit of an affair before this. "Jesus," I exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "I had no idea, not the slightest damn clue. Did you know that Ted and Jilly had an affair last year?" "What? I can't believe it," I exclaimed, even more surprised than when I'd heard the dirt on my own wife. "Jilly is such a straight and starched woman." "Not on the inside, Dave," Mary grinned. "I don't think Kim ever knew that, but I'm sure Nick did. Heck, I've been living in a den of iniquity without even realizing it." "What about the wife swap?" Mary continued, clearly taking some perverse pleasure in shocking me with her revelations. "I don't believe in that," I spat out. "Who?" "Mike, me, Gwen, and you," she continued, unable to completely hide her amusement. "Bullshit," I exclaimed, completely stunned. "I would have known about it." "You would know if it really happened," she agreed, still smiling at my reaction. "Gwen figured you'd never say yes, so she didn't risk asking you." "Damn right," I stated firmly. "I would never have gone for it, and I guess that got you off the hook, Mary." "What do you mean?" she asked, looking a little discouraged. "You made it clear you weren't going to let us have any fun," I reminded her. "Completely openly. I almost got my head bashed in by your big buddies." "Sorry about that," she sighed. I got caught at a bad time. I was still so mad at Mike. Besides, I didn't say that. I didn't say I wasn't attracted to him. Honestly, Dave, the question of whether or not I'm going to let you do this is under consideration right now. I'm very picky about who I go to bed with, but if you were on the market again, you'd be very high on my list. Nana, have you ever tried to swallow and cough at the same time? Well, I tried it and it ended up coming out through my nose, so the result made my interviewer laugh. I desperately needed to change the subject, but not because I was uncomfortable with such attention from a beautiful girl, but because I couldn't find the words to answer her and it seemed like things had gone too far and too fast. God, it felt so good in that moment. I wasn't sure I had gotten all the answers I was looking for, but somehow, less than an hour later, none of it mattered so much anymore, and the future didn't seem so bleak anymore. Next chapter. All of this happened right after I got out of the hospital, thankfully not in the worst condition. My wife Gwen didn't even know I'd left, and when she came home from work in the evening, she was surprised to see me sitting up. "Mike," she exclaimed when she saw me, dropped her bag, and ran up to me. "When did you have time to go out? I was just about to freshen up and come over to visit you." "Today," I replied, raising my hand to keep her from pouncing on me. "We need to have a little talk." "Of course, sweetie," she cooed. "I've missed you so much." "Enough to stop having fun with Mike?" I pounced on her and she froze in place. "Well, Gwen, enough to stop having fun with Mike?" I repeated. "Enough to ask him not to hit me over the head anymore?" Gwen stood staring at me in shock and seemed to age before my eyes, her mouth opening and closing but no coherent words coming out. "Has the cat lost her tongue, Gwen?" I continued sharply. "How the hell did you think you were going to get away with that? The six of you entertaining each other and leaving your poor, damned, clueless husband in the dark." "It wasn't like that, honey," Gwen finally sobbed. "I swear I was only with Mike. I promised you it would only be with one man." "You promised me it would only be one time too," I reminded her. "What the hell happened to that promise?" "Like you—" And then she, realizing the cat was out of the bag, lowered her head, and the first tears rolled down her cheeks. I more or less guessed it myself. I began to answer her unfinished question. Mary told me the rest. "What a bitch," she muttered angrily, raising her eyes to me again. "If she'd kept her word, if she hadn't chickened out, none of this would have been necessary." "You stupid cow," I threw her scornfully. "Do you really think I would have agreed to this? Do you really think I would have let that big dumb bastard Mike entertain my wife and not gone after him?" "Nick and Ted went for it," she muttered unhappily. "Ted was already entertaining Jilly," I continued, as if it was common knowledge. "And Kim's been making eyes at Nick for months now." "You know about Ted and Jilly?" Gwen asked, eyes wide, clearly shocked that I'd done that. "About Nick, too," I ventured, not sure if he knew. "But how will Kim react when she finds out she's late for the show? That her loving husband knocked up one of her best friends?" "Oh God, Dave," my wife pleaded, and tears came to her eyes again. "She doesn't know. She doesn't have to know. She was the hardest to convince. And if she found out we'd tricked her, she'd kick Ted out." "And rightfully so," I snapped, and I had an idea for what to do a little later that day. "What about you, Gwen? How long were you having fun with Mike before our fishing trip?" "I wasn't having fun with Dave," she cried, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I swear to you, I wasn't having fun." At this, I had to cut my tirade short and quickly headed for the downstairs bathroom to vomit everything into the tray. My last question elicited nothing but another burst of tears, confirming my accusations that she was doing things for him that she said she didn't like doing for me, her husband. Ugh. By the time I managed to hold back my sobs, my insides were threatening to burst out and disappear into the pot. With a heavy heart, I went back to the living room, not knowing what to do, but realizing that sooner or later, I would announce the end of our marriage. When I got there, she was gone. I assumed that Gwen had gone up to our bedroom to cry her eyes out, seeing her comfortable life dissolving before my eyes. But I just didn't have the enthusiasm to climb the stairs to check it out. Honestly, at that point, I didn't care at all where she was or what she was doing, and I figured if I ruined my life, I'd ruin a couple others. I was lucky that when I called Ted's house, I caught Kim on the phone, and of course she greeted me cheerfully like the good friends she thought we still were. But I soon disbelieved her of that. "I know, Kim," I stated firmly, ignoring her questions about how I was feeling after the fall. "I know I didn't fall, and I know who hit me. I know you six bastards were entertaining each other behind my back, and I know who was entertaining who." "Oh," she muttered, but immediately fell silent. "I also know something you don't, Kim," I continued blindly. "I know that your husband Ted has been having an affair with Jilly behind your back for the last year or more. I know they were buddies with benefits. And I know they set you up with Nick so they could continue the relationship without getting caught." "That can't be, Dave," Kim wailed. "Nick and I only did it twice, and I felt so guilty that I told him it was over." "It's over for you, but not for them, Kim," I snapped back. "They've been doing it in Ted's office, in rundown hotels, even in that damn park and in your house for all I know. And it's been going on since last summer." I was on a roll again and making it up as I went along, having no idea if it was all true or not and not caring about it, just wanting her to hate him. "I don't believe you, Dave," Kim sobbed miserably, though it was quite obvious that she was beginning to believe. "Where is he now?" I demanded. Her silence confirmed that the only place he wasn't was home. "I'll tell you where he is, Kim," I continued, trying desperately to think of a suitable location that seemed feasible. "The two of them are in that show house we just finished. Do you know it's already furnished? You know there's a big double bed in there?" "I know," she growled back, though how she knew that I had no idea because I didn't really know it myself. "That bastard. And her too. Damn them to hell. It's not the first time he's gone astray, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the last." This was news to me, and I suppressed another thought in me that I'd already managed to think of. "I'm going to divorce that bastard," Kim continued to rant. "I'm going to take everything he has from him. I'm going to kick him out of the house. He'll never see his family again. I will have my revenge. That's it, I'll get my revenge." "Good for you," I encouraged her. "What about you, Dave?" She turned the conversation in a direction I in no way expected. "I need to get my revenge. Care to entertain me?" "Me?" "Yes, you do, Dave," she shouted. "Gwen's always talking about how good you are in bed when we complain about our husbands. God damn it. That was a double blow out of the blue. How am I supposed to react to that?" "Maybe I could take a rain check on that, Kim," I replied with some reluctance. "I really need to deal with my situation before I get involved with someone else." "Okay," she growled. "I understand, but promise me you'll think about it." "I'll definitely think about it, Kim," I promised her, and grinned as I realized that unlike before, I was telling the truth. Kim was pretty, only a few pounds overweight, but in all the right places. "Yes, Kim," I thought, hanging up the phone. "I'll be thinking about it." Next chapter. Well, 1 down, 4 to go. No, not 5. My feelings for Kim seemed to have subsided somewhat because she was the least of the 6 who wanted to get involved, plus her offer. Yeah, that's right. I'd already thought of that. 3 to be exact, since in addition to Ted, my own wife Gwen was already a victim, although she was about to go through more heartache. However, I didn't yet know that the events I had already set in motion would take on a life of their own, and that Kim would do my dirty work for me to get revenge on Nick and Jilly. I had no idea that after our phone conversation ended, feisty little Kim literally packed up her rolling pin, jumped out of the house, and drove home for the new show. I didn't know or even realize that there was an unexpected amount of truth to my false accusations as to where Ted and Jilly were at that moment. They may not have been doing nasty things on the king bed in the house, but they were there when Kim arrived. Of course, they had every right to be there since Jilly was involved in setting up the house and Ted was doing the paperwork. But Kim certainly didn't give them time to explain. She pounced on them, knocking Ted to the ground and putting up a real fight with Jilly, who, unlike Ted, managed to defend herself. In this modern age, of course, one viewer was there with an iPhone, singing and dancing iPhone 5, and I can imagine his disbelief as he, whoever he was, stood there watching Jilly and Kim fight each other, screaming and cursing, grabbing and tearing each other apart. Jilly was taller and stronger than Kim, but by the time the police arrived to separate them, they were floundering in utter exhaustion. The internet video became a hit, first on YouTube and then went viral. Whatever that means. Sorry, I'm just not of that generation. Jilly's family saw the results, and her older brother, Red, very older brother, for some reason decided it was all his brother-in-law's fault. The older brother ended up in rehab and Nick ended up in the local hospital, the same one I recently came out of, but in slightly worse condition than I was. I decided that justice had been served, except of course for Mike, who was having his day. In the meantime, I went back to my house to meet Gwen. who I had given 24 hours to get out of the house. "We can get this Dave thing over with," she pleaded. Less than half that time passed, and she brought back none other than Mike himself to help her convince me to change my mind. I don't know what it was exactly that struck me about Mike on that momentous day, but it seemed to me that the heptagon worked just as well. Like my older brother, I too spent 2 nights at Her Majesty's Hospital while Mike was in the ward in the hallway next to Nick. I know this because I was told, not because I visited them, I assure you. And when I returned to our house, Gwen had already flown out of the nest, never to bother me again. And for me, that almost meant the end of that chapter of my life. Our construction company? It went bankrupt, and the cherry on the cake was that the other 3 had guaranteed loans at the bank 2 months before I decided to join them. And we never got around to doing the paperwork. Tough shit, huh? I don't mean to gloat, but... Well, yeah, maybe, yeah. But I'm not unscathed myself. I lost my main source of livelihood, but hell. When it came to divorce, it was based on my situation at the time, and Gwen's hopes of living off me were dashed. So, although I thought about it and thought long and hard, I never accepted Kim's offer and consequently never tasted the delights of her undeniably attractive body, but of course there were other fish in the sea. "Is that you, Dave?" It was the phone again. "Hi, Mary," I answered, and a smile spread across my face. "I've been thinking about you." "Just thinking?" she asked. "I heard you were divorcing Gwen. Why not think more than just thinking?" "I need to get a job," I informed her soberly. "I can't go out with a beautiful girl with no money in my pocket." "My dad wants to meet you," she surprised me. "I've told him all about you." "Your dad?" "Yes, Dave. My dad worked with Mike's dad years ago. They were both carpenters on a construction site and interned together." "Mike's dad?" "Yeah, that's how we met. My dad was looking for someone to take a load off his plate, and Mike's dad suggested him. He wasn't really suited for the job, but I met him and the rest is history." "But Mike isn't a carpenter, and neither am I," I remarked, as things were happening too fast for me to realize it all. "He's not my father now, Dave," she giggled. "Don't you know my name is Mary Driscoll?" "Are you kidding?" "Not at all." "Driscoll's Construction? Really?" "Dave's family business, and Dad wants to retire in 4 or 5 years." "Largest construction company in the region," I muttered. "There's one," Mary giggled, reminding me of more unhappy times. "I told Dad I'd do the initial interview. Are you free tonight?" "I think so." That's how I ended up at the Anchor Pub, the same one where I'd met Mary for the first time. She was fashionably late, and I sensed her arrival by the silence that descended on the corner of the bar where I'd settled. "Been waiting long, Dave?" Mary greeted me. "Worth the wait," I replied dryly. "Great," Mary replied. "You're just my kind of man, Dave. I think we're going to have a very interesting relationship, don't you?" "Really?" I smirked. I nodded in agreement. I doubted I could handle the beautiful and feisty girl that had come into my life, but I was going to do my best to make the most of it. Either way, I knew I was in for the best time of my life and I couldn't wait to get started. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.